My eldest cousin went to this trade school to learn how to become a plumber. And kind of like little ducks following their mother duck across the street, all the cousins went to the same school. So I went to a technical high school, Wilcox Tech, loved it, great experience. I was learning how to fix cars for 4 years. Then a teacher tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know, Miguel, you should consider becoming a teacher. And that's how I got into the teaching profession. She saw something in me that I didn't see. And that's why I'll always fight for public schools. I think what you're defining is an attack on higher education, whether that's cutting the research dollars, saying that they're all woke institutions, or saying that, you know, you don't need that. The reality is college graduates make on average $1 million more over the course of their career than students with a high school degree. Just facts. There's signs that say project was paid for by, right? And I can tell you there was a cabinet meeting where I was
by
sitting.
By what? Where were you going to finish that sentence?
By the infrastructure plan.
Oh, okay.
Right? Bipartisan.
Trump has put his name on a lot of those signs.
No, but listen to this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Bipartisan infrastructure plan. And the reality.
One thing that is kind of frustrating to me is there were indicators. So you keep bringing this thing up about it's not red or blue, it's green.
Yeah.
And one thing that's kind of frustrated me as the political conversations have changed so much is it seems like there were some things that were just like good indicators of everybody's successful to now people are willing to make compromises on what should be like universal indicators of success for some political agenda. So focusing this in, so conversation topic is very popular in my industry field or whatever, it has to do with college. And there's this weird feeling sometimes of like this, do you know Mike Rowe?
Heard the name.
This Mike Rowe-esque idea of you have real jobs that are like construction and building things and doing stuff with your hands, and then you have like fake BS jobs, which is like being at a computer, being a nerd, being a loser. And even if these jobs pay significantly less, there's like more nobility in them. And I'll say on the other end, I absolutely do not think you should ever talk down to, besmirch, look down on, patronize, condescend to anybody that does blue collar work or working class stuff. We need these jobs and we need people to work them, and they're an essential part of this country functioning. But all the same, the idea that you would besmirch college as like leading to these fake jobs, and you know, we don't need our kids doing that. We need our kids going to trade school as a common one. It is very frustrating to me. What are your thoughts, I guess, on that kind of cultural divide?
Again, we're spending time responding to a narrative that's being created for us. And that's the part that really gets to me, because as a former teacher and educator, I see the value in both, right? A lot of people don't know this, but you know, when I was like 13 years old, I was in middle school. I had to think about high school, right? I had an older cousin, and I come from a large Puerto Rican family, a lot of cousins, right? My eldest cousin went to this trade school to learn how to become a plumber. And kind of like little ducks following their mother duck across the street, all the cousins went to the same school. So I went to a technical high school, Wilcox Tech, loved it, great experience. I was learning how to fix cars for 4 years. Then a teacher tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know, Miguel, you should consider becoming a teacher. And that's how I got into the teaching profession. She saw something in me that I didn't see. And that's why I'll always fight for public schools. It was a trade school, but it was a public school. You know, teachers that really see potential in students. It's always been my goal to recognize that students need to have options when they graduate. Part of the work that I'm doing now, you know, I'm really focusing on helping create pathways between K-12 and higher ed, and saying both and. I think what you're defining is an attack on higher education, whether that's cutting the research dollars, saying that they're all woke institutions, or saying that, you know, you don't need that. The reality is college graduates make on average $1 million more over the course of their career than students with a high school degree. Just facts, right? And that, yes, we do need blue collar jobs, and we do see the, you know, in advanced manufacturing and you know, cybersecurity, and you see a lot more manufacturing jobs and trade jobs being needed as we're building made in America, making things in America. That's both sides of the aisle agree that that's where we're going. So there's a need, a greater need now for those careers that could then lead to a 4-year degree, right? So the President Biden worked really hard for the infrastructure bill, bipartisan. Doesn't get a lot of credit for that, but bipartisan infrastructure bill. You see all the work that's happening across our country? There's signs that say project was paid for by, right? And I can tell you there's a cabinet meeting where I was
By
sitting.
what? Where were you going to finish that sentence?
By the infrastructure plan.
Oh, okay.
Right? Bipartisan.
Trump has put his name on a lot of those signs.
No, but listen to this.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Bipartisan infrastructure plan. And the reality is, I can tell you, I know it in Connecticut. It may be the same across the country. Those signs say this was paid for by bipartisan infrastructure. The word bipartisan was really important to President Biden. When I was at a cabinet meeting when he was talking about it. And there was also a part there that said Joseph Biden, president. If you look at those signs, that part was cut out. Mm-hmm. But my point in saying that is that there are high skill, high paying careers right now that don't require a 4-year degree. And our schools are not really designed to help students have access to that. We don't have enough internships. We don't have enough of that. Micro-credentialing, skill development. But when you have a bridge project, you're going to need folks that are going to be running the cement, running the lines, laying down the foundation. You're also going to need architects. You're going to need engineers. So 4-year degrees are also needed. I think there's a division that was created there that's unnecessary. Part of the work that I'm doing now with Cardona Solutions is closing those gaps and making sure that we're not putting a hierarchy, but saying they're all needed. Because you could have all the 4-year degrees you want. If you don't have people that are doing some of the blue collar work, those degrees are not going to come into use because you're not going to have the labor that you need. And as a tech school graduate, I understand the value of that. But I also don't like the fact that we put a fork in the road that doesn't need to be there. In Connecticut, the example that I give is we have schools that are training students how to weld. 18-year-old kids going to make $60,000, $70,000 when they get out of school. No college debt. They go back for a 2-year degree that the employer pays for to learn how to code. Now they're coding machines that weld. They're making well over $100,000 a year without any college debt. That's happening across our country. We need to do a better job connecting our K-12 and higher ed to get that done. Mm-hmm. That's the work that I'm doing with Cardona Solutions. And really, that's a purple issue, man. And those are the type of things that I think we need to be focusing on in education. That's just one example. Yeah. Access to higher education is another.
You mentioned this earlier, and you mentioned it a few times, this idea of, and you said like options. And I'm a huge proponent. Unfortunately, I didn't finish college because I was working too much, but I'm a huge proponent of higher education, of college. That being said, I definitely recognize that when I was in school, I graduated in 2007, the message was like, you go to college or you're a loser. Mm-hmm. It is the only option for you.
Four-year
if you
college
don't go to
bust.
college,
Yep.
exactly,
Yep.
yeah. And the most frustrating thing to me, I think like culturally, politically, sociopolitically, whatever, is this concept of like the pendulum, where it's like, I think that they went too far over here, so I'm going to be that stupid on this side. Yeah. And the idea of like, we shouldn't push everybody to 4-year institutions. I agree with that, but that doesn't mean they're bad. No. And it doesn't mean no one should go there. It doesn't mean everybody has to go to trade school. And even when it comes up in things, you bring up like different types of labor. You might need people with degrees. You might need people with that do blue collar work. And some people don't like the term blue collar or low skill or whatever. But even when it comes up for, say, immigration, people say, well, these people that are immigrating, these are low skill labor or whatever. And I was like, okay, do you think we don't need that? Yeah. Do you think that we don't have a shortage of all types of labor in this country? Like just because there is low skill labor, high skill labor, some requires more specialization, doesn't mean it's not needed. Like all of it is at the end of the day, we need all these workers. Yeah.
I think it's Colin Cowherd. He's a sports podcaster.
Okay.
He has a show, whatever. I listened to a show once, like 7 years ago. He said something that really stuck with me. He said, people like to live in a black and white world. I live in gray. That hit me. There's a lot of gray. And we like to go extreme, but there's gray. And to your point, I think that mentality of college or bust went too far.
Sure.
Right? And I think the opposite could be true too. That higher education is a farce. No, it's not. So those are the two extremes. I live in the gray. I do believe there are some programs, both in private institutions of higher ed and public institutions of higher ed, that need to evolve, where we're charging students $150,000 to get a degree in something where they're going to be making $35, $40 a year. That's crazy. That's not a good return on investment. During my time as Secretary of Education, I was going after those places. We were holding them accountable for these programs that are not worth the paper of the diploma that they get when they're done. So I think there has been a need for accountability in programming, transparency, our college scorecard. We work to make sure that they're transparent. Hey, parents, with some of the gainful employment work that we did over the last 4 years. Hey, parents, this is how much a degree is going to cost. And this is how much debt you're going to end up in, typically, if you go to this school. And this is how much money your child is going to make when they graduate. And this is what their starting income is. I think all parents should get that information so that they can make good decisions. And there are some programs, both in for-profit institutions and in public institutions, that really have run their course and are not needed. You don't need a 4-year degree to do something, and you don't need kids to be in debt where they can't buy a home or they can't put their kids through college because of the college loans that they have. So I think both can be true, that there are some programs that are the return on investment is not good. But I think it's wild to think that we want to throw out the whole higher education system and that it is not needed. That's absolutely false.
I think some of the most frustrating things to me when I look at that issue too is that sometimes it feels more, you used this term bridging earlier, that sometimes it just feels like a bridging problem where there will be all the resources on this side and nobody even knows that they exist. And there are so many people that, I'll see these complaints about, I've got $60,000 of student loan debt. And I was like, that's a lot of, you're like twice the average of people that need to borrow. And I'd be like, well, what's going on? And so many of these conversations start with, so I went to an out-of-state private school, and I was like, why? and so many, and not to, my audience hates me on these days because they're a little bit younger, so a lot of them have student loan debt. But it's like there will be so many students where it's like you have an electrical engineering degree. You didn't need to go to halfway across the country and acquire so much that you could have did an in-state school. Yeah. And we're not even talking about 2 years at a community college or anything else. Just like an in-state school would have saved you 90% of the cost on this. Yeah.